Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're actually leaving Earth's atmosphere to analyze a domain that has quietly transformed from this pristine vacuum of scientific discovery into, well, the ultimate high ground of modern warfare. We're talking about space. Specifically, we're going to look at India's Defense Space Agency, the rapidly accelerating militarization of orbit, and what actually happens when the next geopolitical conflict kicks off hundreds of miles above our heads. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by defining this ultimate high ground, trace the timeline of space warfare, and then really break down the strategic impact on India. After that, we'll zoom out to look at the global context and challenges before finally wrapping up with a future outlook and a quick revision. All right, part one, the ultimate high ground and this increasingly contested space domain. So look, we are seeing a massive shift globally right now. Space? It's just not a realm strictly for peaceful exploration anymore. It is an active, highly contested warfighting domain. Enter the Defense Space Agency, or the DSA. This is a tri-service agency of the Indian Armed Forces, and they are tasked directly with operating India's space warfare and satellite intelligence assets. And the government is rapidly scaling this agency up because it acts as a necessary, consolidated shield. It was really created as a direct response to the aggressive global deployments of military satellites we've been seeing, specifically those being rapidly launched by China to monitor the region. Moving right along to part two, the timeline of space warfare and its key milestones. Historically, this is a huge pivot away from the Indian Space Research Organization's civilian peaceful origins. Decades ago, the military basically had to beg for satellite time, but everything shifted in 2007. That year, China successfully tested an anti-satellite, or ASAT, weapon, completely blowing up one of their own weather satellites and creating this massive, dangerous cloud of space debris. That was an undeniable wake-up call for New Delhi. It proved that adversaries could literally blind them from orbit. Fast forward to 2019, India responds with Mission Shakti, successfully testing its own ASAT weapon just to prove it could definitively defend its assets. And right after that success, the government immediately formed the DSA to bring all these capabilities under one unified command. To truly understand how this ecosystem operates today, you have to look at the division of labor among the key players. ISRO still plays the vital, foundational role. They provide the physical launch vehicles. But once those assets are actually up in orbit, the Defense Space Agency steps in as the primary operator. And then, critically, you have the Strategic Forces Command. They rely heavily on those exact same satellites for incredibly sensitive, high-stakes operations. We're talking nuclear targeting, long-range missile guidance, the whole shebang. Maintaining a clear operational boundary between these three entities is just absolutely crucial for seamless national security. Okay, part three. Let's look at the strategic impact on India through three core pillars. We need to break down how this militarization impacts India's day-to-day capabilities. There are three core pillars you really need to master here: enabling network-centric warfare, maintaining space situational awareness, and protecting the digital economy. Now, these aren't just abstract military concepts, right? They are the absolute bedrock of modern statecraft. Without these three pillars securely in place, a modern military is effectively operating in the dark. So let's break these down one by one. Let's make this abstract idea of network-centric warfare a bit more concrete by looking at the hardware. You've got modern weapons like a supersonic BrahMos missile or an advanced MQ-9B drone. Total technological marvels. But here's the catch. Without secure, unjammable satellite communications and precise GPS, a multi-million-dollar drone is practically just a very expensive flying paperweight. The DSA ensures the military has dedicated secure bandwidth, like with the GSAT-7 series satellites, so these systems can communicate instantly across vast distances, without the constant fear of an enemy just jamming the signal mid-flight. Next up, we have Space Situational Awareness, or SSA. Now, sure, the DSA absolutely tracks thousands of pieces of space debris to prevent orbital collisions, but their real focus? Tracking enemy spy satellites passing overhead. It's basically an incredible game of high-tech hide-and-seek. If the Indian Army knows the exact minute a Chinese surveillance satellite is going to be positioned overhead, they can strategically halt sensitive troop movements, camouflage heavy equipment, and hide their true capabilities until that electronic eye has safely passed. It's all about controlling exactly what the enemy can and cannot see. But critically, this isn't all about military defense. It's about protecting everyday civilian life, too. Think about it for a second. What would actually happen if a targeted orbital attack knocked out the satellite grids on, say, a random Tuesday morning? India's entire digital economy, your ATM transactions, stock market trades, commercial flights, would instantly grind to a terrifying halt. So the DSA acts as this vital, invisible shield in the sky to prevent adversaries from crippling terrestrial infrastructure from hundreds of miles above.
Which brings us to part 4, global context and challenges. What are the roadblocks ahead?
While the tactical benefits we just covered are super clear, we have to zoom out and look at the broader global picture. Globally, the creation of India's DSA very closely mirrors the establishment of the United States Space Force. By setting up these dedicated military branches, nations are acknowledging a pretty harsh reality. The sci-fi concept of space wars is no longer fiction. It's a present-day reality. Tomorrow's conflicts are likely going to be decided, won, or lost in orbit before a single bullet is ever fired on the ground. Both the US and India are locked in this relentless race to consolidate and actively defend their crucial space-based assets. But there is a massive hurdle standing in the way: the budget. Setting up dedicated military constellations of synthetic aperture radar, or SAR satellites, is astronomically expensive. For some context, SAR technology gives a military the almost superhuman capability to see clearly through thick clouds and operate in pitch-black darkness. But because these dedicated, hardened military satellites cost so much to build and launch, India currently relies pretty heavily on dual-use civilian satellites. The vulnerability there? Civilian models totally lack the extreme shielding and electronic hardening required to survive a targeted electronic warfare attack or an electromagnetic pulse in space. Finally, part 5, future outlook and revision. Let's lock in those memory triggers. So, where is this all heading? We are anticipating a major evolution in India's space defense architecture. Right now, we're essentially at step 1, with the Defense Space Agency handling current integration within a limited scope. But the long-term plan? That's for the DSA to eventually upgrade into a full-fledged Defense Space Command. And this bureaucratic upgrade is huge. Shifting from an agency to a command structure will provide them with significantly greater funding, distinct procurement budgets, and the essential operational autonomy they need to actually act decisively in a fast-paced modern battlefield. And why is the structural upgrade so important? Because it maximizes their absolute biggest operational advantage: jointness. Because the space defense apparatus is staffed jointly by personnel from the Army, Navy, and Air Force working together in the same room, they completely eliminate duplicated efforts. Real jointness means a single secure satellite feed can simultaneously be utilized by a naval warship navigating the high seas and a tank commander operating deep in the desert. It represents the absolute pinnacle of military efficiency. All right, as we wrap up, if you take nothing else away, remember these core themes. The true trigger event for this new era was the Mission Shakti ASAT test. It fundamentally proved the need for aggressive defense. Going forward, the core function of India's space doctrine revolves entirely around tri-service space integration. The accelerating militarization of space means that concepts like maintaining strict space situational awareness and enabling seamless network-centric warfare, they aren't just future goals anymore. They are the required minimum standard to survive and operate effectively today. Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought. The upcoming Def Space Symposium strongly signals the massive entry of the private sector into this formerly government-only arena. So, as more and more private companies launch their own constellations and space becomes increasingly crowded, commercialized, and heavily contested, we really have to ask ourselves, who will ultimately control the high ground tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and we'll see you next time.